Welcome. My name is Natasha Sherman, and I am your host. Today's show is about an organization called Witness to Innocence, or WTI. It was founded in 2003 by Sister Helen Prejean, internationally renowned anti-death penalty activist, and Ray Crone, the 100th person exonerated from death row in the United States. Witness to Innocence began as a project of the New Orleans-based Moratorium Campaign Education Fund. 2 years later, they moved to Philadelphia, where it transformed itself into one of the most powerful and unique anti-death penalty organizations in the United States. Exoneree members have educated tens of thousands of Americans through speaking events at colleges, universities, professional associations, government officials. Basically, they have shifted public opinion on the death penalty, playing an integral role in successful repeal campaigns in New Mexico, New Jersey, Illinois, Maryland, and Nebraska. So I have two guests today. The first one I will be talking to is Stephanie Anderson. She is the Director of Communications for Witness to Innocence. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you.
So, I interviewed Kwame Ajamu, who was exonerated, spent 29 years in prison, 3 or 4 of them on death row, and exonerated. And this is kind of one of the most compelling things about abolishing the death penalty. Once you've put someone to death, you can't say, oh, oops, sorry. So talk to me about your involvement and your personal mission here as well.
Well, I've been involved in abolition work in Washington State, where I live, since, 2008, 2009. I got interested in being politically active and got involved with Amnesty International, and it's one of the focuses of their work is abolishing the death penalty. So it was through involvement on a local, regional, state level that I met the current executive director of Witness to Innocence. That's sort of the immediate connection to my current work. But I knew him from when he worked at Amnesty and spoke about abolition, and he speaks on many different issues. And I think, there are so many good causes in the world to be involved with. When I joined Amnesty at the time, they did a weekend of faith and action to abolish the death penalty. I found that really intriguing. I've always been fascinated by places where there are interesting intersections, and so that was the vehicle by which I got involved with the death penalty. And then once you start to volunteer on an issue, people start associating you with that issue, and then you just get more and more involved.
Yeah. So again. I can't say it enough, just in terms of the human race. Killing somebody doesn't resolve the problem, but the possibility of killing an innocent human being makes the legal system murderers, really. And so one of the arguments is, somebody killed somebody, it's justice. So how do you counter that argument?
Well, basically, I think the death penalty would be defensible if it accomplished anything. If it, not any one thing, but if you could say that it accomplished anything, we could maybe have a conversation about how it's defensible. But there's a lot of research that shows it doesn't deter crime. It doesn't cost less money. It doesn't achieve anything that actually makes us safer as a society. The cost argument I've always found really interesting because it comes off initially as very cold and calculated. But I actually find the financial argument a moral one because it's a use of resources. So, for instance, you can spend 3 times the amount of money to keep somebody on death row, or you could take that money and investigate cold cases. You could clear rape kit backlogs. You could build infrastructure to support victims' family members. A lot of people in the aftermath of crime don't have a good support system or resources available to them. So the financial argument that initially reads as very cold and calculating becomes a moral one. And so in that instance, there's just nothing that the death penalty actually accomplishes for us. It doesn't make us safer. And I think ultimately that's what we all share, that same hope and value. We all want to live in a safe society, and the death penalty does not do anything to get us there.
Right. It's interesting. A number of years ago, I interviewed a correction officer who worked in New Jersey State Prison in Trenton for 50 years, 30 years as a corrections officer and 20 as a civilian. And he brought with him an inmate who had been charged with murder. He had been part of a robbery where someone got killed. He hadn't pulled the trigger. He was sent to prison for 18 years and eventually got out, and they became good friends. But I asked him, at the time that you were involved in this, he described it being a gangster, being cool. Did you ever think of the consequences, or did you ever intend any of this to happen? And he said, absolutely not. You're not thinking. I said, did you ever think you were going to get caught? And his reaction was, what? Who, me? So in that sense, the whole thing is like saying smoking, if you continue to smoke, you will get lung cancer. Well, I don't have it yet. It's out there somewhere. So I think part of the thing is, it doesn't deter anybody. Nobody's thinking they're going to get caught. They wouldn't be doing it if they thought they were going to get caught. So in that sense, it's not a deterrent. And I think the financial thing is significant because they could be using the resources differently. So your organization is not an innocence project. It doesn't go into prisons and represent people who say they're innocent. Your organization is working with, first of all, to abolish the death penalty, and then working with exonerees. Is that correct?
Right. Correct. Yeah, we're part of the Innocence Network, but we don't do casework.
Okay. So with the exonerees, is there any, besides them going out and talking about this and sharing their life experiences and making a difference that way, is there any transition that you participate in that has them transition more easily into civilian life, so to speak?
So we have a community resource organizer. She's essentially, I think her training is in social work. So she is in touch with exonerees and helps meet needs and just be aware and connected with them. We have we have an emergency fund to help in certain circumstances. So we do things like that. We do an area where we're doing growing advocacy is around compensation.
Yeah.
So in your interview with Kwame, he talked about, the compensation he received. There's no federal standard for compensation. Some states do a good job with compensation. Some states have no compensation plan. You might be released after being in prison for 2 decades with, a jacket and a bus ticket or something like that. I mean, so we've been engaged with the Department of Justice on working towards a federal standard. And part of that is just helping people understand what exonerees need, because it's not immediately apparent to people who haven't gone through that, simple things like an identification card, a social security card, with exonerees, the issues of record expungement and how it's hard to build a life when you've got a record, even if you're exonerated,
Yes, you're still viewed as damaged goods somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have about another minute in our part of the conversation before we talk with Leno. What is your biggest challenge and your request to the world at large?
So, I mean, there are a number of challenges, but I would say right now, looking ahead, so many people who are doing good work struggle for funding. So we have speakers that we can send out, though a lot of people who would love to host speakers don't necessarily have funding set aside for something like that. When there is funding set aside, it would be great to send, 2 or 3 people rather than one. So I think just funding in general.
Yeah.
And I think, for our organization and other organizations doing good work, funding is always a challenge. And I think looking ahead to the political spectrum in the next 4 years, I think we're all sort of nervous about the increasing needs we're all gonna feel for funding. And as far as what people can do, I would say engage locally. It's a little different depending on where you are state by state. So I would say to look for, 1 or 2 great national organizations. Like my entry point was Amnesty International, and then your state abolition group if you're in a state with the death penalty. And
how many states still have the death penalty?
31.
Wow, you have your work cut out for you.
Yes.
Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us. And now we're going to talk to Leno. I'd like you to help me welcome my next guest from Witness to Innocence. He is Magdaleno Rose-Avila, or more fondly known through the human rights community as Leno. He is the executive director of Witness to Innocence. Leno has a long history of civil and human rights work, which led him many years ago to become involved in the movement to abolish the death penalty. In 1998, Leno joined with Sister Helen Prejean, one of the founders of Witness to Innocence, WTI, to develop and launch the Moratorium Initiative, which became one of the most effective strategies to reach out to politicians and the public on the issue of abolition. While working for Amnesty International in Atlanta, he organized the largest meeting of national leaders in the African American community on the death penalty, including Coretta Scott King, Reverend Joe Lowery, the National Black Police Association, Congressman John Conyers, and many others. He also worked with Cesar Chavez and other leaders of the historic United Farm Workers Union. Welcome, Leno.
Thank you very much.
That's pretty impressive. Clearly your mission in life is to make a difference.
Well, sometimes when I read or hear about my own resume, it sounds like fiction, but couldn't have lived through all of that. But all of us have great opportunities in life, and we do what we can.
Yeah, and clearly you've done a lot. So, I mentioned with Stephanie that I interviewed Kwame Ajamu, who had been in prison wrongfully convicted 29 years, a few of them on death row, like unbelievable. And the organization is made up of exonerees. I'm assuming you're not one of them.
I'm not one of the exonerees. Thank God I haven't had to suffer, but the leadership of our board and our organization is exonerees, and they're the real heroes. As staff, we're just able to, I think we're thankful that we can support them and help build the organization and get their voices out into the public.
So, a lot of people have a very visceral reaction to the whole conversation of death penalty and abolishing it, and people are very polarized very often. What do you say about the death penalty that can open people's minds to the possibility of abolishing it?
Well, I think that everybody, I think the first thing you have to do, depending on the group, is you have to listen to them. What are their concerns? And when you can begin talking to them about what is just and unjust, people see that we make mistakes, right? So that how many shoe bombers did we have on an airplane before we changed the policy? Just one, right? Mm-hmm. And we've had 156 people exonerated from death row. So shouldn't that give us an indication that something is wrong with the system? And there's probably 10 to 15 others that were executed that people believed could have been innocent, but we weren't able to prove their cases. It didn't have the time or the resources. So I think that one is there is a lot of fear in people's minds that people will get out and recommit the crime. But right now we know that a couple of things, that we have a way of keeping hardened criminals in prison without parole. And if people really believe that, then they should be ready to move for abolition. I think people are, the biggest thing that motivates us sometimes is fear.
Yes.
And politicians have a great way of doing that during the election. They say, well, I'm tough on crime. But you know what? All these people that say they're tough on crime, so when a district attorney takes a case of one death row case, he basically says no to about 20 cases that need to be investigated. Now, we say to him that everybody who's had a loss in their life needs to have their case investigated. In addition, every one of our exonerees, the majority of the cases, once they're found that they're innocent, the district attorney doesn't go back and start the investigation because the real killer is out on the streets. That's wrong. That's like a double whammy to society.
Sure is. Yeah.
And the fact that prosecutors and police lie on the stand should tell people that this is not right, it's not just, it shouldn't happen. But I think people deal from on the death penalty on the other side from fear, and you cannot diminish the pain that people who have lost a loved one. They want what they call justice, but it's really revenge. But you can understand that. And there's a growing number of murder victims' families who, years after the murder, say, it's wrong. It's wrong to killing this person, even if they were guilty, is not going to bring them back. And most of the people that, when they're in prison, they're 17, 18, 19 years of age. You and I were both very different people at 17, 18, 19 years of age. I'm sort of rational now, but then I was not the most rational Mexican running around Colorado.
Yeah. It's interesting because when I was doing research, I saw a clip of some prosecutor who had put an innocent person in jail on death row, and I don't know, and I'm not even sure it was death row, but he went to see him after he had been released from prison after 29, 30 years, whatever, and now the guy had lung cancer and had about 10 months to live.
This is Mr. Ford in Louisiana.
So he went to him and he said, I'm sorry, I was trying to make a name for myself, and, I was, there's all kinds of pressures at that age. Like you say, at that age, different things are important to you. And the guy who was dying said, I appreciate the fact that you came to say this, but I can't say I forgive you. You took away my life. And the part that I don't understand is, what is that strong motivation to get someone at all costs, to find someone so you can say, I solved it, even though you didn't necessarily solve it.
Right, and in the case of Glenn Ford, I did meet, and Glenn passed away shortly after that plea that was on 60 Minutes, and I met up with the prosecutor about 6 months ago at a legal conference, and he really is suffering because he knows he made a bad mistake. And I also ran into another district attorney from Bexar County in Texas who also feels the same way. He was too busy getting elected, and his staff pushed for the execution of a man who should not have been executed in Bexar County, Texas. And that's basically the San Antonio area. I think prosecutors are pushed, and people don't know, because they want to be tough on crime. They think that it's an easy way to get votes. It's an easy way to get the public, easy way to get press. And nobody tells them that they're doing something very wrong, and you have to reach them. And so now we're having a number of prosecutors, a number of people who were wardens at death row prisons, who are saying, what I did was wrong. I want to ask for forgiveness. I want to make sure that people don't do this. We're a society that is so much smarter, so much better, that we can find ways to protect society and not have these issues. And a lot of the people who are committing heinous crimes, the real people, there's a lot of social inequities that go on in their lives that are never corrected, and some of them are mental issues. But in the case of Kwame and his brother and their best friend, together they served 100 years for something they didn't do. And we find this in all of our, we have two women who are members of Innocence, our Innocence Network, who were accused of killing their own kids. Now, how awful can that be, that here you are, a mother, the state knows you didn't kill them, they know they're lying, but they accuse you, and in the case of Deborah Milkey, in Arizona, she spent 22 years to prove her innocence. They accused her of helping to plan the murder of her son. Now, when your child is killed, you're falsely accused, and you're not allowed to grieve or go to the funeral, something is wrong with America. But I know if you look at, and we're going to provide you with a copy of our film so that you can see that, but our exonerees talk about when their mothers were dying, they did not allow them to go to the funerals or to go see their parents when they were present. What kind of inhumane society are we that we don't want to give that, even if a person was guilty? So we say to America, for a moral reason, don't kill your own citizens. Why does Europe have as a cause of being part of the European Union that you can't be in favor of the death penalty? And they can't extradite people to the United States to be executed. Why? Because they went through World War II, and they saw that power should not be given to governments.
Wow. So, Stephanie mentioned that there are 31 states that still have the death penalty.
Right.
So the question is, can you make a difference there?
Well, we can, and we're already making a difference with our international partners. So the Europeans have gotten their pharmaceutical companies to quit selling the deadly cocktails for executions. So that's diminished. So there's about 2% of all of the counties in the country that produce about 50% of the death penalty cases. So we, along with our partners, highlighted a lot of those counties. Out of the top 20, we have 5 new prosecutors, and we hope to reach out to them before they start doing death sentences. We've had less death sentences in the last 2 years, less executions. People do not want it. We have a growing rate of, this is not just a liberal cause or a people of color cause. There's good folks in the evangelical community that I've met with that are opposed to killing of anything, whether it's a child in the womb or somebody in prison. And a lot of conservatives are looking at the budgets and they're saying, why are we spending so much money on prisons, and in particular the death penalty, which is the most expensive part? They say, we got to be smarter. We don't have the money. So in every state, if you look at their budget, one of the biggest items is corrections, and they never correct anything. They're just warehousing people. We have more people per capita than any country in the world. And that's kind of a shame. And we're the 5th largest country that's executing people. And we're in there with China, Iran, Iraq, countries that we shouldn't be a part of. We're better, or we think we're better, right? So we got to be smarter. And I think that we appeal. And one of the things that I'm running a personal campaign with some other people, and people say, how are you going to change it? I believe that everybody is equal, but I think women have a greater power in this issue. And I think women's voices, we're going to be working on campaigns to raise the voice and the stature of women. Because after all, as we know, if you educate a woman, you've educated a family. Mm. Women, I think, on social issues are much better than the men. And they're going to vote the right way, and they're going to educate other people. Because they can see it's wrong. Yes. For a man or a woman not to be able to go to their parents' funeral, even though they were in prison.
Yeah, it's a systemic kind of a disease, right from the beginning, and it goes all the way through. But I think it's really about raising people's consciousness and also tapping into the inner recognition that people already have, but no one has kind of tapped into it. And you're talking about reaching out to women because, again, there are so many things out there to be for or against, but if you raise that awareness, I think change is definitely possible.
Well, we shouldn't be a country of revenge. When I embraced, I used to be a bit violent myself as a young man, and I was involved in drugs. I carried loaded guns. I hated white people. But once I understood nonviolence, is that you can hate a person's action, but you can't hate that person. Every human being, almost every human being, is redeemable. They can change. I changed. A lot of people that I know that are in their 50s, 40s, 60s, they were different people. And so what you want to do is you want to teach people. One of the things that we don't teach in our schools, and even in some churches they don't teach, is compassion and forgiveness. And what we teach is revenge. So if you're the victor, you can squash the little person. And it's not about, one of our members said that you can free an innocent man from prison, but you cannot free them from the grave.
Yes, yeah.
And people have to know that.
Actually, Leno, we can end on that line because we're at the end of our time, but that really is a powerful, way to end. I want to thank you so much for being on the show, and mostly for what you do. And we all start in different places, but you made choices along the way that had you end up here. So thank you.
Well, thank you, because we can all make a difference in this world of ours.
I agree with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
My name is Natasha Sherman. Thank you for joining us.